Welcome to our video about the fascinating world of Pokemon and their placement on the Tree of Life. Today, we take a closer look at Tauros and its connection to all odd-toed ungulate Pokemon. Ready? Let's go! Euungulata is a modern term for a group within the hoofed animals, Ungulata, which consists of the odd-toed ungulates, Parasidactyla, and the even-toed ungulates, Artiodactyla. These animals walk on their toes, with the toes protected by hooves, a horn-like structure similar to the fingernail. Particularly exciting, whales, Cetacea, also belong to the Euungulata, as they evolved from land-dwelling, even-toed ungulates, a prime example of evolutionary adaptation. The Euungulata are a prime example of the diversity and adaptability of mammals. From grazing horses to ruminating cattle to diving whales, they all share a common evolutionary origin. The Artiodactyla are a taxon, a systematic group of mammals that consists of two externally very different groups, the even-toed ungulates, Artiodactyla, and the whales, Cetacea. That these two groups form a monophyletic group, descended from a common ancestor, has been confirmed by molecular genetic studies and is also supported morphologically by fossil finds made more recently. Even-toed ungulates are now considered paraphyletic, as they are not as a whole the sister group of whales and do not form a closed lineage without them. The closest relatives of whales are the hippopotamuses. The ruminants, in turn, form the sister group of these two together and are thus more closely related to whales than to the remaining even-toed ungulates, suiforms and camelids. The most important synapomorphy, shared derived trait, of the Artiodactyla is the special structure of the astragalus, which has a pulley joint at both the upper and lower ends. This was previously thought to be an exclusive feature of even-toed ungulates, as it also seemed to be absent in fossil whales. In modern whales, the hind limbs have regressed. However, in 2001, it was discovered that in the early fossil whales, Pakicetus and Ichthyolestes, Pachycetidae, which lived in the late Eocene, this special astragalus was also present. Another shared feature is the three primary bronchial tubes. Otherwise, whales and even-toed ungulates have taken completely different evolutionary paths. While whales became the best adapted marine mammals to water, even-toed ungulates developed into efficient runners on land, which, thanks to sophisticated digestive systems, especially the ruminants, adapted excellently to a plant-based diet. Due to their relatively uniform body structure, even-toed ungulates were long considered a monophyletic group. Since the mid-1990s, however, a series of molecular studies has shown that whales also evolved from even-toed ungulates, and that hippopotamuses are the closest living relatives of whales. This, along with morphological studies, refuted the earlier assumed descent of whales from the Mesonychia, a carnivorous hoofed animal group of the early Cenozoic. The oldest fossils of the Artiodactyla date from the early Eocene, around 55 million years ago. Since these finds appeared almost simultaneously in Europe, Asia, and North America, it is very difficult to determine the origin of the even-toed ungulates more precisely. These early forms are grouped in the Dicobunidae, or Dicobonoidea. Their best known and best preserved representative is Diacodexis. These were small, initially only about rabbit-sized, animals with a slender body, long thin legs, and a long tail. The hind legs were significantly longer than the front legs, the typical toe structure was not yet fully developed, and the teeth were low-crowned and simply built. Already in the early to middle Eocene, radiation and the emergence of numerous lineages occurred. The oldest whales are documented from 53 million years ago, and ancestors of the suborders of even-toed ungulates, suiforms, tylopods, ruminants, also emerged in the Eocene. Only the hippopotamuses appeared around 15 million years ago. To explain the resulting 40 million year gap, the common ancestor of whales and hippopotamuses must have lived before the first whales, i.e. around 55 million years ago. There is evidence that the Anthracotheriidae, a group of even-toed ungulates widespread from the Eocene to the Pliocene, could be the sister group of whales and the ancestors of hippopotamuses. The horned animals, Bovidae, or bovids, are a family of ruminants, which in turn belong to the even-toed ungulates. They currently form the most species and form-rich group within the even-toed ungulates and the hoofed animals and include, among others, cattle, sheep, goats, and various forms of antelopes. The family occurs naturally in both Eurasia and Africa and North America. Domesticated forms also reached Australia and South America. Horned animals are very often found in open landscapes. Many species also inhabit forests and wetlands, as well as rocky landscapes. Depending on the type of landscape, different social systems have developed, ranging from territorially solitary, often site-faithful animals to large, roaming herds. Reproduction is therefore dependent on the lifestyle of the individual species. Thus, there are monogamous pairings as well as polygynous reproductive strategies. Overall, horned animals feed on a variety of plants, from tough grasses to soft leaves and fruits. Occasionally, animal remains are also consumed. In general, two major morphological groups can be distinguished within the horned animals. One includes cattle, buffaloes, and kudus. The other includes goats, sheep, antelopes, and gazelles. This division was already noted at the beginning of the 20th century, but the research history of the horned animals as a unified group goes back to the first half of the 19th century. In the past, the exact systematic classification of the group was the subject of numerous debates. Only molecular genetic analysis methods, which emerged at the end of the 20th century, provided a coherent picture. Not undisputed is a revision of the family from 2011, which led to a doubling of the number of current species. This reevaluation of the horned animals met with some rejection, but also found multiple supporters who considered it necessary. From a phylogenetic point of view, the horned animals are relatively young. The oldest evidence dates to the lower Miocene about 18 million years ago. In total, around 280 species belong to this family, whose range of variation extends from the small royal antelope, Neotragus pygmaeus, with a head body length of around 40 centimeters and a weight of 2 kilograms, to the giant bison, Bos bison, with a body length of 380 centimeters and a weight of 1,000 kilograms. A distinguishing feature of all species is the horns, of which there are almost always two. An exception is the four-horned antelope. Among domesticated forms, the Jacob sheep also has four horns, and which are shaped in a species-specific manner. As an extremely diverse group, the bovids have developed a relatively variable body structure adapted to the respective landscape conditions. Tendentially, open-land species are larger than inhabitants of enclosed landscapes and also possess larger and longer horns. Sexual dimorphism is more pronounced in herd-forming species than in solitary ones. Open-land animals also often have a longer body and long, narrow limbs with similarly developed fore and hind legs, which is to be understood as an adaptation to rapid movement. In forest dwellers, the hind legs are generally more strongly developed and the forelegs significantly shorter, resulting in a raised position of the rump. Furthermore, their body is usually shorter, which is due to the more confined spatial conditions in forests. Coat coloration appears variable, ranging from monotonous brown to individual spots and stripes, which often have a camouflaging character. The tail can be short and flat, but also long and round and may have a tufted end. In many species, throat sacs occur. Some possess a nasal mirror. The horns, whose length varies from 2 centimeters in the royal antelope to over 1.5 meter in the scimitar-horned or the giant eland, Taurotragus derbianus, are developed in some species only in males, but in most in both sexes, with those of the females often being smaller and less robustly built. The causes for the development of horns also in female animals are not fully clarified. Defense against predators, food competition, or a camouflage effect in intraspecific competition to mimic a male animal are assumed. Since frequently horned females tend to occur in large and conspicuous open-land species and less in forest-dwelling forms with camouflaging coats, some studies consider protection against predators to be one of the driving factors. The horns are bony outgrowths of the skull, consisting internally of spongy substance or cavities and possessing a rough edge at the lower rim. They originate from an ossification center in the skin, os cornu, and grow from bottom to top, forming the typical pointed structure of the horns. The individual horn is connected to the frontal bone in most species via a short bony pedicle. Exceptions are some representatives of the duikers, Cephalopus, as well as the four-horned antelope, Tetracyrus quadricornis, and the nilgai, Phocelaphus tragocamelus. The peg never reaches the dimensions of the bony horn, but always remains thinner than it. The horns are surrounded by a sheath of horn, keratin, which is hollow inside, which, among other things, earned the bovids the old name cavacornia, hollow horns. The sheath begins at the lower edge of the bony horn and always protrudes beyond it. It grows from the inside outward. Unlike deer and pronghorns, the frontal weapons of bovids are never branched. Moreover, the horns are neither shed annually like deer antlers, nor does the horn sheath undergo a seasonal renewal like in pronghorns. Rather, they grow throughout life and do not regenerate in case of damage or breakage. The horns run partly almost straight, as in klipspringers, Oreotragus, or are curved as in the wisent, Bospinasis, or are twisted and curved in various ways. In some species, they may be twisted, referring to the right horn, clockwise, homonymous or inverse, or counterclockwise, heteronymous or normal. Such torsions occur either along the longitudinal axis of the horns, for example in the eland, Taurotragus oryx, without affecting their straight course, or they also occur in curved horns as in the impala Epiceros melampus, or form open spirals, such as in the greater kudu, Strepsiceros strepsiceros. In any case, the twists arise due to different growth rates in the horn sheaths. Horn growth is genetically controlled, as with similar structures of all frontal weapon bearers, by genes that are also responsible for the formation of skin, bone, and nerves. Further characteristic features exist in the structure of the teeth and skeleton. In general, the skull of bovids is very uniformly built, regardless of the degree of relatedness or the inhabited landscape areas. Variations are found only in individual features, such as crown height of the teeth, snout length, or general size development, which to some extent reflect the dietary habits. A striking characteristic is the absence of upper incisors, the upper canine tooth, and the first premolar in both the upper and lower jaw. Only some early, now extinct forms still possessed a small upper canine. Enlarged canines, as found in some deer and musk deer, were never developed in bovids. The lower canine resembles the incisors, incisiform. The standardized dental formula of the bovids is 0.0.3.3 or 3.1.3.3. In some species, however, the second premolar is partially absent. In general, the premolars are molarized, meaning they resemble the posterior molars. These are characterized by a chewing surface pattern of longitudinal, crescent-shaped solenodont enamel ridges. They are also significantly more high-crowned, hypsodont, than in deer. The tooth row usually ends beneath the orbit. The frontal sinuses are strongly reduced in a larger portion of the bovids. As is typical for even-toed ungulates, the central axis of the hand and foot runs through digits 3 and 4. Both digits are fused in the area of the metapodia and form the cannon bone. The inner and outer metapodia, digits 2 and V, i.e., bones attached laterally to the main ray, cannon bone of the metatarsus or metacarpus, are more strongly reduced in bovids compared to deer, as is the number of finger and toe phalanges, which usually amounts to only 1 or 2. However, the respective terminal phalanges still bear hooves. All bovids thus possess only one pair of functional toes per foot, digits 3 and 4. Based on the structure of the feet, inhabitants of closed and open habitats can be distinguished. The former have more widely spread toes. The individual toe bones, phalanges, are also arranged in a more or less linear row so that the foot is oriented closer to the ground. In the latter, the toes are close together. The middle phalanx connects to the foremost hoof phalanx at a steep angle and projects almost vertically to the ground. This feature is particularly extremely developed in klipspringers. Bovids occur naturally in Eurasia, Africa, and North America. There were never wild bovids in South America, nor in Australia. However, domesticated species have been brought to almost all countries. The landscapes used by bovids vary considerably depending on the species' requirements and range from sea level to mountainous regions and highlands around 6,000 meters. Most bovids inhabit open terrain. Thus, the African savannas as well as the Rocky Mountains of Asia each offer numerous species an ideal habitat. Other representatives are found in desert-like regions, more temperate steppes and grasslands, in forests or in wetlands. Many species prefer undisturbed landscapes, while others also cope with areas more heavily influenced by humans. Within the bovids, various types of social organization have developed, depending on the naturally given habitat. The following general forms can be distinguished: solitary and territorial animals such as dik-diks, klipspringers, and oribus. These usually live in monogamous pairs and mark their territories. Both sexes are very similar, and juveniles leave the parents' territory after reaching sexual maturity and establish their own pairs and territories. Solitary and non-territorial animals, such as bushbucks, rather rare among bovids. The activity ranges of several individuals usually overlap, although there are often core areas without overlap that are used exclusively by individual animals. Some males may also show territorial behavior. Herd-forming and territorial animals such as waterbucks, lechwas, topaz, and some antelopes, the most common form of social system among bovids. The animals form roaming herds of females and juveniles, while males are generally territorial. Young adult males separate from their original group and initially live in bachelor groups or with a female before establishing their own territories. In species with very large home ranges and thus long migration routes, males establish territories only during longer stays. Herd-forming and non-territorial animals. Very common among cattle and goat-like species, but also among elands. Here, reproduction by males occurs through dominance and not through territoriality. During the non-reproductive period, the sexes live separately. As in many mammals, there is a positive correlation between body size and the size of the activity range. The Bates's pygmy antelope, Neotragus batesi, with a weight of around 2.5 kilograms, has territories of 0.01 to 0.03 kilometers, while the Uganda kobe, Cobus tomasi, which weighs up to 94 kilograms, has territories ranging from 3 to 20 kilometers squares. Furthermore, the size of the home ranges depends on many natural factors. Generally, the availability of food determines how extensive the activity range is, and whether animals remain site-faithful or migrate, with roaming animals predominantly forming herds. Such group formations can in turn be divided into two principal types. There are herds with contiguous or partly loosely scattered home ranges. The respective use of individual areas occurs in a more or less fixed sequence depending on the seasons. The herds of the African buffalo, Cincerus caffer, for example, have activity ranges of 100 to partly over 1,000 square meters. In addition, there are nomadic groups with extremely large activity ranges, such as the Mongolian gazelle, Procapra gutturosa, which undertake migrations across areas of up to 32,000 kilometers. The activity ranges are traversed without a fixed order, mostly in search of the best feeding grounds, which arise from individual rainfall events. A special phenomenon among herd-forming animals is the occasionally extremely large herd associations, such as in the Serengeti white-bearded wildebeest, Connocates mearnsii, or the western Thomson's gazelles, Eudorcus nasalis, which can comprise thousands of animals and, for example, undertake an annual migration of more than 450 kilometers in the Serengeti. Foraging takes up a large part of daily activities. Small species such as dik-diks and grisbach tend toward frequent but very short feeding phases, whereas large cattle tend toward continuous, longer-lasting food intake. In both cases, however, the total duration of daily feeding time is on average the same. In principle, bovids are herbivores, although some species occasionally consume birds, reptiles, and amphibians. Within the bovids, three basic feeding strategies are known: specialized and selective consumers of soft plant food, browsers, such as dik-diks, bushbucks, klipspringers, and kudus. They make up around 40% of the bovids and mostly include smaller animals. Very small species, such as blue duikers, are specialized in protein-rich food, such as fruits, seeds, and flowers, and digest these comparatively quickly. Larger representatives predominantly eat leaves from trees and shrubs. Parts of numerous plants are frequently consumed, with some duikers known to eat between 50 and 80 species, and some kudus over 150 species included in the diet. Water intake occurs via the food. Grass eaters or consumers of coarse plant parts, grazers, are often larger, rarely very small representatives, which make up 25% of the bovids and predominantly eat grasses or fibrous plant parts. They are generally open-land dwellers, and a further distinction can be made between animals found in well-moistened to swampy landscapes, buffaloes, wildebeests, hartebeests, or in arid regions, oryx antelopes. These animals are mostly water dependent. Consumers of mixed plant food, mixed feeders, include impalas, elands, and numerous goat-like species. They make up around 35% of the bovids. These animals are adaptable to various landscape areas. Alternating hard or soft food components are consumed depending on seasonal availability. Water dependency often fluctuates with the quality of the food. The type of food consumed is also reflected in body structure. Browsers generally have a small and narrow mouth, while grazers possess a significantly larger and broader one. Based on the teeth, cutters and grinders can be distinguished. Cutters possess long, narrow molars with numerous sharp edges. The opposing teeth of the upper and lower jaw act like scissors and cut the predominantly soft plant food. Grinders, on the other hand, have broad molars with few elevations. They partly resemble those of horses and can grind the tough grass food well. The bovids are a family within the order of even-toed ungulates, Artiodactyla. Within this order, they belong to the suborder of ruminants, Ruminantia, whose members possess a multi-chambered stomach, and to the subordinate group Pecora, characterized by the evolution of horns and antlers. This means bovids are most closely related to deer, Cervidae, giraffids, Giraffidae, musk deer, Muscidae, and pronghorns, Antilocapridae. Among all these, the bovids form by far the largest and most diverse family. Originally, the pronghorn, Antilocapra americana, was thought to be closely related to bovids, and for some time, it was even classified within them. However, molecular genetic studies now place the pronghorn at the base of Pecoran evolution, while the bovids form a sister group to deer and musk deer. These three groups are sometimes combined into a larger superfamily known as the Bovioidea. The divergence of bovids from other pecorans occurred at the transition from the Oligocene to the Miocene, roughly 24 million years ago. Already in the early 20th century, zoologists recognized a fundamental dichotomy within the bovids, dividing them into two principal lineages: Budontia, or the bovinae, which include cattle, buffaloes, and kudus, and Egodontia, or the Antilopinae, which include sheep, goats, gazelles, and antelopes. Modern molecular studies have confirmed this division. The bovinae are typically medium to very large animals, often heavily built with strongly muscled limbs. Their horns are usually curved, often with keels on the front side, and they never show the transverse rings seen in the Antilopinae. Bovines generally prefer woodlands or dense undergrowth, reflecting their heavier physique and browsing lifestyle. By contrast, the Antilopinae are extremely diverse, ranging from small to large species. Their coat coloration is often more varied, with distinctive stripes or facial markings, and their bodies are lighter and more agile, well adapted to open landscapes. While bovinae have long been considered an independent subfamily, the Antilopinae were once split into several equally ranked groups. Within the Bovidae as a whole, around a dozen tribes are recognized, 9 of which belong exclusively to the Antilopinae. In modern classifications since 2004, bison are included within the genus Bos. The American bison forms a group with the yak, while the European wisent is more closely related to domestic cattle, or the extinct aurochs. Molecular genetic studies have also reshaped our understanding of elands, Taratragus, which are now nested within the genus Tragelaphus in its original definition. For this reason, Tragelaphus has been subdivided into up to 5 genera to reflect these relationships. The dwarf antelopes, traditionally grouped under Neotragus, have also been reclassified. A 2014 study revealed that Neotragus is polyphyletic. It contains only the royal antelope, Neotragus pygmaeus, while other former members are now placed in Misotragus. Interestingly, Misotragus is more closely related to impalas, Apiciros, forming the sister group of all other Antilopinae, whereas Neotragus itself is more closely related to duikers, Cephalophini, and klipspringers, Oreotragus. Future research will determine whether Nesotragus should be united with the Epoceratini, and Neotragus with either the Cephalophini or Oreotragini. Within the duikers, the genus Cephalophus also proved to be non-monophyletic, as it included Silvicapra. As a result, a revised classification was proposed, separating several lineages. The red-colored duikers, including Peters's duiker, the red duiker, the black-fronted duiker, and Ogilvy's duiker, were reassigned to Cephalophorus. while the Zanzibar duiker was moved to Leucocephalopus. This reorganization was officially implemented in 2022. Antelopes do not form a unified taxon within the bovids. The term antelope is actually just a collective designation for slender, typically tropical bovids, and has nothing to do with actual phylogenetic relationships. The name itself comes from the Greek antholops, meaning flower eye, and originally referred to a mythical creature. Similarly, the word gazelle derives from the Arabic ghazal, carrying a similar poetic meaning. While the even-toed ungulates are a phylogenetically ancient group, already documented in the lower Eocene around 55 million years ago with Diacodexis, the bovids appeared relatively late in evolutionary history. Precursors of modern bovids can already be found in the upper Oligocene of Asia with Paleohypsodontus, and in the lower Miocene of Europe with Antigamorix and Hispanomerix. These early forms were mostly hornless animals with slightly high-crowned teeth that already displayed the solenodont chewing surface pattern typical of ruminants. The hornless Amphimaschus, also known from numerous European sites of the same period, is sometimes considered a bovid relative, though its systematic position remains debated. Some researchers see it as closer to pronghorns or even deer. Among the oldest true bovids, the genus Euungulata stands out. Dating from the lower Miocene, these small, duiker-like animals were no larger than roe deer, with tiny spike-like horns set closely together. The earliest Euungulata fossils, about 18 million years old, have been found in Western Europe and Central Asia, with additional horn fragments known from the Middle Miocene of Southeast Asia. Euungulata is generally considered a stem bovid, while the slightly younger Pseudoeutragus from Central Europe may represent an early Antilopine ancestor. During the Miocene, bovids underwent a massive diversification across Europe, Asia, and Africa. By the Pliocene, all major bovid lineages were already established. Some, such as the Tregylophene, evolved exclusively in Africa, while most others were widely distributed across Eurasia and Africa. The migration of bovids to North America remains less well studied. The earliest evidence comes from the Upper Miocene, around 7.5 to 6.8 million years ago, represented by Neotragoceras, whose exact evolutionary placement is still uncertain. By the Lower Pliocene, roughly 5 million years ago, Caenocapra, a close relative of sheep, appeared in southwestern North America, marking the beginning of the continent's native bovid history. That's it for today's episode. We've seen how Taurus and its bovid relatives fit perfectly into one of the most fascinating and successful mammalian lineages on Earth. In our next episode, we'll dive into the mysterious world of Gyarados and uncover its surprising evolutionary connection to seeking. So don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and join us next time as we continue exploring the Tree of Life, Pokemon Edition.